Hey folks, this is Aaron the Pedantic. Before I get started, I wanted to note that but there have been two instances so far where someone wanted me to look at something in one of my videos. I clicked on it and I had an ad. And I just want to let you know I'm not at 1,000 subs yet, so I'm not actually able to monetize. I am not putting ads on my videos. If YouTube continues doing this, then whenever I get to 1,000, then I probably will monetize, because if somebody's going to make money off of it, I might as well be part of that equation. So I just want to let y'all know I'm not doing that. I don't know how they basically said that they would start doing that regardless, but I just didn't know it was going to happen to people before they get to 1,000. So now I know. Anyway, but what today is about is I wanted to talk about my house rules so far for BX. Basically, I am learning more and more as I play it, as I run it. And there are a lot of changes that I've had to make because I'm just wanting to add on to it. That's why I consider BX to be a fantastic platform for building. I consider AD&D to be a fantastic platform for altering, adjusting if necessary, but really just a sound system out of the gate. But BX, on the other hand, is something to build on, in my personal opinion. I think that's why people love it so much. So I'm just gonna kind of list off the things that I've changed and give a little bit of why I changed it. So first off, I adjusted encumbrance. So I am using the detailed encumbrance rules, which basically are coin weight, and so the only thing that I really changed there is I've adjusted some of the weights of some items to be more what I would consider realistic, for lack of a better term. And I have made it where, depending on your character's race, they will have particular bonuses to how much they can carry, but depending on race and strength. So halflings get the least of a bonus based on race, and dwarves get the highest. I think I've already covered that. I think I covered that on a previous video. So secondly, I have an occupations chart that I'm using. So the occupations chart is it's on my blog. If anybody's interested, you can just click on my blog is on my channel. If you go to my channel here on YouTube, there's a thing up there on the top. I haven't really put anything in my blog for a while, but this is something that I made, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. It's an occupations chart. It's a D100. And basically you roll on it. It will tell you, what your character used to do before they became whatever their class is. Some of them make them more likely to be certain classes because of the fact that I also provided re-rolls on particular stats depending on which occupation you roll, because I felt that it would only make sense that if your character has been doing this one thing for most of their life, that they would be better in some ways at those things than others. And I also noted how this could be represented in other ways. And additional to that, they also have different starting equipment, different accesses to funds, just stuff like that. So we've had a lot of fun with it. It also makes it where halflings and elves and dwarves are kind of rare because you have to roll them on the chart. Heavily inspired by DCC, which I believe, there's also a chart like this in the AD&D book, but it was to determine the actually I think it's basically the same thing, to determine what occupations your character may have done, what skills they would have from those occupations, basically. So I did allow the players to bring in classes from the OSE Advanced book. I'm starting to kind of regret it a little bit. Not that anybody's really using it that much, but it's just that the more I look at them, the more I just kind of don't like them. The more that I just kind of want the 4 core classes. And, then we can have the demi-humans, and that's kind of it. The more I start to think that maybe I'll start doing something else. One of my friends on the Discord server has talked about how he does things, and I really like the way he's presented it. And it's something that I actually was thinking about doing something similar to as well, where basically you kind of have these the core classes, and then they're going to be influenced by other things. Now, my setting is very specific, so I thought that I would tie it into what nationality are they, basically, because there are going to be some variances in how a fighter from this nation fights versus a fighter from this nation, or a fighter that is a barbarian, that kind of thing. And so tying it more into that, than anything else. Same thing with clerics. If you belong to a particular deity, then you're going to get access to different kinds of spells. There's going to be different limitations on what your expectations are, your duties, all that kind of stuff. Just, kind of going down the line and trying to make it really connected to the setting. I don't know that that's the best thing for me to do with this public game, because a lot of the players may not have any interest in getting to know the setting. And that's actually supposed to be okay with the way that I'm running this game. It's supposed to be basically as deep as you want it to be. Because a lot of people, they just don't get to play old school stuff very much. And for them, it's just I'd like to sign up for a game. I want to show up. I want to do a dungeon delve, and then I want to forget about it. And I don't have any problem with that. If I was doing a more regular table game with the same group every time, then yeah, I'm gonna definitely dig deeper into the setting and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to make that an option for the people that want it. But at the same time, I don't know that I want to make that something that's front and center for everyone to have to interface with. So I also used the rules from old school, quite a few rules from OSE Advanced. So I brought in the spell books in learning spells, which is basically an adaptation of how in AD&D, you can learn spells, based on your. In this case, it's based on your intelligence. So if you have a high intelligence magic user, they are a lot more likely to be able to record new spells from a scroll. And it also decides how many spells they begin with. So most of the time, they're going to start with at least 3, but hopefully more. So I am using that. I love that as a rule. If you aren't familiar in OSE, the standard is basically you start with 1 spell. And it's determined by the referee, which I'm someone who likes to say your first spells are all rolled randomly. And if you get a duplicate, you roll again. So that is what I'm doing there. So with combat, I'm also incorporating several rules from Old School Essentials Advanced, which, again, are often interpreted from AD&D. So you have the attacking with 2 weapons. I haven't actually seen anybody use it because nobody really wants to give up a shield. They just don't want to get hit. They would rather do a little less damage than potentially get hit. But basically, you can make that second attack with a penalty. The weapons have to be small size, and so it's a penalty of a -2 on your first strike and a -4 on the second strike. So really not a great trade, but it's possibly something that could yield benefits. I am using charging rules, so you can charge into a melee. You get a bonus to hit, minus to your AC for ascending AC. And I also made it where when you do that, this is additional, you actually get to go 1.5 times your movement. So it's kind of like a sprinting charge. I felt like that's something that's kind of neat, where it's like, yeah, if you're just running in like a mad person, then you can get there a little bit faster. So I'll allow that. Missile attacks on targets in melee. That one is just that one's kind of rough, honestly. So that one you just randomly determine, who is going to be the recipient of the projectile. So if you have 5 people in an area, and 3 of them are allies and 2 of them are enemies, then there's a 2 in 5 chance that you're going to possibly hit an enemy, and a 3 in 5 chance that you're going to possibly hit an ally. That's a cool rule. I like it. I'm using it. A lot of times people don't want to risk it, but if there's ever like serious odds, where it's like somebody is surrounded by like 4 and they're by themselves, then I'm pretty sure that the arrows are going to start flying. Parrying. I am using the parrying rules. Splash weapons, I'm using that. Splash weapon is really, it's kind of funny because before I even saw the splash weapon, I kind of was doing it already. So just so you know, basically you announce where you're throwing the object. It's going to, have splash area effect. And then, so you make the attack roll, and if you miss, then you roll a d12. And then it's like the faces of a clock that determines which direction 5 feet from your place that you were trying to hit does it land. And I really enjoy that. I was just doing a d6, and I was doing the same thing basically, but there's a little bit more of granularity with the d12. So I implemented that natural 20s are maximum damage with your weapon. So I may make a rule that it's only max damage with 1 die, just because there have been some times when a monster, with like 3d6 damage or something, is gonna pull up a nat 20, and then it's they just received 18 points of damage. It's like, which is I mean, it's great, but at the same time, it's pretty intense, and I don't know. It is definitely something that it weighs more for the enemy than for the players. And I usually don't have any problem with that, but I'm mulling it over. So alignment, I did some clarifications on what exactly alignment is, and I've changed, things to reflect more of the cosmological struggle, because it's not something that is actually reflected in OSE. As written, it's basically just, a reflection of how you feel about order and stuff like that, rather than what side of this cosmological conflict are you on. One of the things that I did, and this was partially to address people just going absolutely nuts with flasks, oil flasks, just lighting them, throwing them all the time, and me being like, okay, but did you actually have it out? Because before, I'm pretty sure that if we encountered an enemy, you would have your sword ready. So, what exactly is this that you're able to just retrieve it really fast and then have it wicked, have, a lighting source? I just was like, you're going to if you don't say that you have this out, then you can't use it. Basically, what you have to do is you have to dig through your pack, or let's say you have it on a belt or something, you can do that. And then you can retrieve it in about a round to get it ready. Keep in mind, I'm using 10-second rounds, so. But this whole, I'm just going to grab it, throw it. Who knows where it was? It might have been somewhere in my backpack, stuffed in there with all of my lambus bread. I'm not a fan, not personally a fan. So I feel like that really helps with people just being like, yeah, I'm going to throw an oil flask, because that actually at a certain point just became the default way of fighting, was just throw oil flasks. So then there's questions of availability and all that kind of stuff. I never actually got to the point where I made them less limited in quantity, and I will get to that. So for HP, I started out being very stern on HP, whatever roll you get that first, at first is what you get. If you have a character at 3rd level that has 3 hit points, so be it. That was my philosophy, and it was fun. We had a great time with it, but at the same time, people just got to a point where they're like, I don't really like having these purely disposable characters. I just feel like throwing them away, and it kind of wastes time in the session. So can we not do that? And basically what I decided was I was going to implement that there was a minimum for HP at level 1. After that, you're on your own. So basically it's average HP, which rounds up because that's how that works. So, your fighter is going to have 5 HP minimum. Your cleric is going to have 4. Your thief is going to have 3. And, so is your magic user. So that is what I did with that. It's still brutal, still very brutal. I also, before I did that, and I may remove this because it's no longer really necessary, but I don't know. Some people were talking about how they kept on getting 1s because Avray sucks. Avray being the dice bot for Discord that we use. So, they said if you get, 2 1s in a row, whenever you level up, could you re-roll one of the 1s? And I was like, fine, I'm okay with that. I don't know how I feel about the dice bot. I feel like it's pretty random, but it does have some interesting patterns sometimes. But, so what else do we have? So whenever your character dies, because we have a lot of death in this game, I made it where you get these things called pissed off points. Somebody tried to get me to make it something that was more POOP instead of POP. But basically, it's a pool of points that the player has where they can, whenever they roll their occupation, they can spend some points to change the roll. So they can get closer to things that they're more interested in. Unintended side effect, I do have a few rolls on the occupation table that are incredibly stacked as far as how beneficial they are. So, it is what it is. I mean, they almost everybody is kind of going to want to be a noble or a wizard's apprentice or something like that. But, it's fine. I don't really mind that too much. It just means that they end up having better stats usually. It's fine. So I already covered that. So one of the things that I did was whenever they get to level 5 and up, they get access to followers. Now, whenever they get to level 9, a lot of them will get the opportunity to get better followers, basically, and more of them. But until then, I kind of wanted to start leaning into the idea of a second tier of play, being this middle point between being a nobody and then being somebody who is part of domain level stuff. So this middle tier is kind of the I don't want to use the adventurer, conqueror, king thing, but you're basically an up and comer who has proven themselves. People are starting to take serious note of you, and others aspire to be like you. Kind of like local legends in a way. So because of this, there are people that are going to flock to you. So they're going to be level 1 characters in your class type, and I basically, you get to name them, roll their stats. They get a half share, and they level up. And if you die, then you get to take over one of them. So if they die, then they don't come back unless there's a percentage chance that they may come back in order to replace the ones that have died. But it's not terribly common. It is not terribly common. Actually, it's fairly common the way I've written it. I think I'm going to change that. Okay. So I did some stuff about curse. I mean, the cursing stuff was really just, I changed the way remove curse works, because just having this spell where it's like, there goes the curse. I changed the way that works because I felt like it was a little bit too lenient. I want curses to have a bite to them. And there to be different levels of curses. And so basically I just kind of wrote up a thing about how this was going to work. So I'll just read it because that's probably easier. So curses will vary in direness, progression, and effect. Curses that are a nuisance but not dire are instantaneous. They are also the easiest to dispel. There are no penalties in attempts to dispel these curses. So you do have to make attempts, though. These are the most basic kinds. I just equip the weapon. I can't take it off. That kind of thing. So those are probably the most common ones. But I wanted to have advanced curses that aren't just gone, basically. So and a lot of these things I have to spell out because I'm not the only referee. I have to make sure that we're all on the same page. So curses that are dire with incredible pain and suffering usually take time to set in. The longer it takes, the more mild the symptoms may be at first. This should be a maximum of a week unless it's a dormant curse. For every day that passes, the attempt to remove the curse has a -1 penalty. This means there's a certain point at which remove curse isn't enough. Dormant curses can be incredibly dire, but await specific conditions to trigger. These require rituals, atonement, or quests to undo. From here on, using remove curse works like this. The recipient makes a save versus spell with the cleric's level as a bonus. If they succeed, the curse on the recipient is lifted. If they fail, the recipient must take 1d4 damage for every hit die of the creature that inflicted the curse. If their HP falls to 0, the excess damage results in rapid progression. Adding to the numbers of days, the curse has been equal. The curse has been in place equal to the excess. So the idea being that it's kind of like soul damage in a way, so trying to lift the curse whenever it fails, it makes it worse. Now let's say that you have so much HP, it doesn't actually take you to 0. Then you're fine. I mean, basically it's not going to affect you. It's just that the next day you're going to have an additional -1 penalty because every day that passes, it's an additional -1 penalty. So it puts some urgency into getting this taken care of. My game right now might not be the best conduit for this kind of rule because of the fact that we use real time and we only play once a week. So, in my sessions, we only play once a week. There's a Monday game, a Tuesday game, a Wednesday game usually, a Thursday game, a Sunday game sometimes. And I think somebody's trying to do a Saturday game, so there's a lot of games. So I mean, there are opportunities, and they can also do some of this stuff during downtime. But I think it would work better for a table game, just a simple table game. Magic item loot. Now, because we have a public game, sometimes we come across items. You don't know who you're going to be working with from one week to the next. So the charitable, let this person have this thing because it's going to benefit them doesn't always apply so well. So because of that, we use loot initiative. I had a very complex method. My friend Hayden had this simpler method, and he won because everybody liked his, and I thought that mine was going to be a little bit more fair, I guess. But everyone liked his, so I'm like, okay, we'll just use that. It's simpler. You just roll a D100. Whoever gets the highest picks first. Then you go in order, and you just keep on going around until everything's been picked. So I restricted actively chaotic as an alignment. So just to clarify, we have passive and active on the alignment spectrum. So this means basically you can be passively chaotic, which means that you don't really respect authority or order or anything like that, but you're not an agent of chaos. That would be active chaotic, and that would mean that you actually serve the forces of chaos or actually part of this war. So you could be a passively chaotic individual living in a society who has no respect for the laws of the society or for anything like that. So it's just kind of a way to have this distinction. Same thing with active and passive neutral. So the active neutral is going to be like enforcing the balance of things. And then the active law is going to be trying to stifle the forces of chaos and, maintain order in the world. Let's see. I had to clarify. There are some of these where I just have to make a clarification because, some things keep happening, and then I'm like, actually, this shouldn't be an issue. So some of the clerics, because of the fact that I'm using the Catholic Church as an analog for the clerical order and the faith, the big faith. Some of the clerics kind of seem to feel that, like, if they encounter a cursed object or any kind of chaotic magical item, they have to destroy it. So this became an issue because then, we've got some players who are like, well, I really would like to actually try out that thing. Maybe that thing is useful and that kind of thing. So I just had to kind of make a clarification that the clerics are not quite obligated to do something like that. It's just that, because there are some things that are going to be useful that can be used. And in that case, their job is to act as like a watchdog, making sure that nothing bad happens, basically. So I had to make that clarification because we had this problem where every time we encountered a, cursed objects, anything chaotic seeming, then the cleric would want to scoop it up and take it to the church to have it destroyed. And then, I'd have to go through the whole bit where, the church is like, well, we're going to do some augury and figure out if it should be destroyed. And then, just on and on and on. If there's anything that can be done to help it. All right. So whenever I first created the servers, I wouldn't say that. I'm not even going to say this because this is actually just a regular rule that I wasn't implementing before. So I already mentioned before that for blindness or just not being able to see, I just took the rules from AD&D. So what else did I take from AD&D? Well, I took the resurrection survival score. So basically, the higher your con, the more likely you're going to survive your resurrection, attempt. But I did add some additional penalties. So the reason for this is because Raise Dead is very cheap in BX, and I don't like that. I would like life to still be very cheap, not resurrection. So I did some workings. Just because of the fact that I felt that having clerics that can resurrect people that easily would have some serious ramifications on how the world works that I don't want. I want there to be the possibility of assassinations, and stuff like that, actually bearing fruit. Rather than, okay, we assassinated this political leader, now their cleric came and resurrected them and, nothing ever happened, basically. So I took the rules from AD&D, basically verbatim. I added that in order to perform this, it has to be done on consecrated ground. It takes a whole day to do it. The body has to be intact, and it takes about 1,000 gold pieces worth of exotic oils, incense, and etc. What does this mean? This means that this is something that you would reserve for very important people. And even then, it's not guaranteed because how many of them are going to have an 18 con? Admittedly, the con, the first time, because you lose con permanently with every time this happens. But, the first time you're probably going to have between 70 and 85% chance to survive it. So, but you never know. What else? So with martial classes, I think I've already talked about this. For fighters, especially, I instituted the rule about a form of the old sweep attack rule. Basically, if you're attacking one-hit die creatures and you kill them, you kill a one-hit die creature, you can make another attack on another creature as long as you have not done that more times in your level. So if you're a level 1 character, you kill one with the first strike, you can strike on the next one. If you're level 5, you could do that 4 more times. You could do 5 attacks, as long as you're not having to move around to do it. Even that, yeah, for the 10-second round, I'm going to say that's the end of it. I mean, it has a very epic feel to it, which I don't know how I feel about that, but at the same time, it makes the fighter really useful. And I like fighters to be useful. I like all of the classes to be very useful. As I said in the cleric video, I really feel like the cleric is the one that has the most oomph. The magic user probably second place. All right, so I changed oil flasks in BX, or at least in OSE. Oil flasks, you throw them, they do a D8 damage, and then the next round they do another D8 damage. I don't like that. I was fine with it at first, and then there was a little seed planted in my head where somebody said, these don't actually burn that much. Like, they're meant to burn slowly. And so I was like, that sounds right. So, of course I looked into it. That is true. And, then I looked at AD&D, and then they have Greek fire. And so what I did was I came up with 3 different levels of incendiary devices to be thrown, basically. So you have your oil flasks. Those are really not going to do much damage, but they can light flammable materials just fine. I feel like that's fair. So if you have like a whole bunch of straw or a bunch of like oil or wine or something, then yeah, you can throw an oil flask onto it if it's lit, and then it'll catch fire. But if you throw it on an enemy, it's just going to burn them for a second. It's going to be hot oil, it's going to burn for a second. But I just didn't really see it being good for that purpose. So I decreased it to a D4 damage, which is not great. But if you roll a 4, then it does another 4 damage on the next round, and that continues. So there's a potential for it to do some kind of decent damage, and it makes it where your magic users, if they are out of spells, can still, do some decent damage. Because otherwise, as the rules are written, they'd just be throwing daggers, which daggers are fine. They do D4 damage, right? But this could also be helpful. Now, there's also incendiary oil. So this is something that is a lot more flammable, and it is pretty much just meant to spread fires. So this one I kind of saw as a step up. It's more expensive, but it does 2d4 the first round and 1d4 the second round. Again, it is less than before because I felt like, a d8, basically the equivalent of a sword strike, is just kind of like, and then it does it again. So, I mean, it just makes it where, and plus it spreads. that was the original interpretation of the oil flask being thrown. And I ended up not being a big fan of that. So then I also added Greek fire. So this is an alchemical compound. It costs 100 GP, so it's up there in price. You don't have to light it, but it's incredibly volatile. So it does a lot of damage, 3d4 the first round, 2d4 the second round, 1d4 until 1 or 2 is rolled. So this is to represent the fact that in the historical understanding of Greek fire, it is a pain in the butt to put this thing out. And so, it's something that I wanted to continue with. So this gives people something to to spend resources on, getting a relationship with an alchemist, which they actually have, getting them the components to make them, maybe getting into alchemy themselves, and, making their own Greek fire. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they will have to be careful not to fall with it in their bag, because bad things can happen. All right. So I've made the videos about, the charm person spell and how it was, how things transpired. We had some wonderful, wonderful times with charm person. Unfortunately, I feel like I was making a very poor ruling on it. People pointed this out, that basically all it says is that, the target will will think of you as a best friend. And so I was basically allowing the players to use this, and then it's like they are basically a slave, more or less. Like they'll just come around and follow you, fight with you, and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, I feel that was actually a very poor interpretation on my part. We had a lot of fun with it. It really doesn't bother me. The only thing that I said then was basically that it was, if you did it to too many people, it would seem very conspicuous, and so then you might be sought out, for your indiscretions when it comes to charming people willy-nilly and making them your slaves. So instead, I kind of reiterated with my my interpretation now that basically, whenever I think of my best friend, I love my best friend. My best friend and I have been best friends since we were 10 years old. He's an awesome dude. If he ever wanted me to go to a dangerous place, I would say no. If he ever wanted me to do something that is just outside of my nature, that would make me feel like a bad person, I would say no. If he wanted me to get him out of a tight spot, and it's something that could be potentially dangerous for me, I probably would help, So I had to kind of like put it into that perspective, because I was honestly, I was being too lenient, and this is one of the oftentimes whenever things catch me off guard, I tend to be a little bit too lenient, and that is one of my vices as a DM. So basically, you could see Aaron 10 years from now as a DM that probably won't have any leniency left. But until then, my players get to enjoy the fact that I'm often kind of, still figuring a lot of this stuff out. So I did some changes to hirelings and dogs. So before, what they would do is, because we were doing this whole delve thing, you would go, as collectively, you just say, all right, we're going to buy this many dogs. We're going to buy, this many porters for the day. And, so spend the gold, we get them, and they come with us. And that was really it. And it was just how many dogs are available, because this became a thing where we would have, 6 to 8 dogs, going on a trip, and we would have, like half of them returning a lot of times, because they would be put in the front, they'd be put in the back, they'd be put in the middle. Their whole job was to kind of receive enemies. And I wasn't really handling that very well. Basically, again, too lenient. So, the dogs were extremely obedient. They weren't making any extra noise. They were fighting everything that came by, nearby, all that kind of stuff. And I felt like something was wrong about it, and also, they just keep going back to this vendor with, dog died. Sorry, need another one. Dog died, over and over and over again. And a lot of people have pointed out that more than likely the person who sells dogs, would probably stop wanting to sell them to that person. Like, even though we try to think, oh, well, they're spending good money, so like, wouldn't we want to, keep the business going? Fact of the matter is that a lot of people have strong morals, especially if they are animal people. So, basically, I just kind of re-emphasized how that stuff's going to kind of work. So I made sure that I put in what their morale numbers are. I'm not leaving that up to loyalty, just because I don't really think that how persuasive your character is, or how their force of personality necessarily, it could affect those things. But at the same time, this is kind of a more primal morality, or not morality, morale. And so, I put that into place. The dogs, I also increased their prices, but a lot of this was because before they were renting them. And I know that this is going to sound ridiculous, but I didn't really, whenever I first conceived of this, because I didn't know how often people were going to play, And I was thinking, oh, you might be gone for, a month or two, then come back, and then you're going to owe all kinds of money if you're just like paying rental fees and stuff. And I was like, I don't really think that's very cool. So what I did was basically there was a deposit fee. You pay a deposit fee, and then you get some of it back. You get most of it back if you return them in one piece. And so, it wasn't very costly at all. And so, yeah, they didn't really lose too much out of it. Again, my mistake. So instead, I'm just like, no, you're buying them. They are yours. You name them. You are responsible for them. And all that kind of stuff. You also need to feed them. And, we're just gonna keep doing that now. I did that. So the dogs are 50 gold pieces each. Some people were saying that's a lot of money. AD&D says that that's a lot of money, but I really feel like the economy in AD&D is actually quite different. That's something I will talk about in another video. Is I feel like the economy in AD&D is quite different, in that in BX gold pieces just fly. They just, they're just all over the place. I mean, even your food is gold pieces. So, yeah, I mean, 7 days of rations cost 5 gold pieces, for crying out loud. So I would think that an animal that you would have to raise and feed for several months and breed and all that kind of stuff would cost more than what it did. What AD&D would suggest it would in that book. War dogs, I made 500 gold pieces. A lot. I know it's a lot of money, but if you look at the process involved, it takes them about a year to mature. Historically speaking, that's a lot of food. That's a lot of investment, and so. I also made it where they require a week of bonding with the owner. That's just because whenever I was curious, so I looked up whenever you have a trained war dog, what's it like to buy, like to get them and then work with them. And basically they said that in order to get them to respond to your commands properly, you have to bond with them for at least like a week or so that they get used to you and they understand that you're the one who's in charge. Makes perfect sense. So I did the same thing. They won't even notice that. They'll just know that they need to buy it a week in advance before they get to use it. But I also decreased the stock of all of them. This could be explained all kinds of different ways. This could be that, like just maybe some hunters started buying them out. It could be a million things, but the stock was, I didn't actually decrease the stock in the war dogs, but how frequently they come. So how are they going to react to this? Well, reactions have been neutral or positive mostly. And most people that I talked to about the issue, just seeking their input, were pretty much on the side that, using dogs as fodder was a pretty despicable thing. And they were suggesting that, basically druids come after the party and stuff like that. And that really doesn't apply very well whenever you have a different party every time, almost. Well, not every time, but pretty frequently. So, but for the most part, they were on the page that it's going to be difficult. So, not only are they going to cost more, are they going to require you to keep them and feed them? Are they more limited? But they also, of course, they can't climb. That's something that needs to be remembered anytime that there is a climbing thing happening. My rats over there need to chill. I don't know if you can hear them. But they also are going to make a lot of noise. They are, because whenever they smell something that is, some kind of unfamiliar scent that they're trying to get your attention, they're going to bark. Whenever they hear noise that sounds threatening, they're going to bark. When they see something that's threatening, they're going to bark. And that noise is going to carry. It's not going to carry too much more than the sounds of battle, I would think. Maybe more, I would say. Maybe more, because barking is very loud. But it just kind of depends on how loud your fight is, right? But so basically, increased chance of wandering monsters. and morale checks, all those kinds of things that I wasn't really incorporating with them. And when it comes to supernatural things, they're just going to be freaked out. So what this is going to do is it's going to take them, hopefully, out of the cannon fodder department and put them more into the companion department. There for detection, for tracking, stuff like that, not for just, letting them soak up damage so that none of our precious PCs die. Those are the main changes that I've made so far. As I mentioned before, I am looking at working on the economy because I do think it's weird that for the price of 2 weeks of rations, you can get a sword. To me, that's weird, just because of the fact that iron is going to be something that it's going to have several, different spots before it gets to the consumer, right? It's going to have to be mined. It's going to have to be transported. It's going to have to be processed, by, smelting. It's going to have to be forged, all that kind of stuff. And then it's even more for whenever we're talking about armor, because, you have to get a proper fitting, all that kind of stuff. It's a whole thing. So I have a lot on the pipeline. By the end of this, I think that the game is going to be even better. People may disagree on that, if they were really happy with things being a little bit more lax. And I understand that. But we did have some people that were complaining about this being too easy, not enough tension, that kind of thing. So, I also took the thing about X-ray vision and how that works in AD&D. So I forgot to post that over in the house rules section. So I did take that because X-ray vision otherwise is just very cheap and easy. So that's it for today. This was a long one. I apologize, but I hope y'all got some good stuff out of it. Maybe I would love to hear y'all's rules, maybe some feedback on the ones I've got, all that kind of stuff. And just look forward to hearing from y'all. Y'all are awesome. Have an awesome day.